helpful. It could be the diet too, exactly. School refusal or school phobia. Some children will, if they're especially getting bullied by a teacher or by a peer, they will, start to have a really hard time going to school. They might even start to have a really hard time sleeping because they don't want to get up in school, get up next morning for school. If they have difficulty separating from parents, again, that's developmentally appropriate for a 1 or 2 year old, even a 2.5, 3 year old, but older than that, they should be able to separate from parents easily. If a child is hyperactive, this one is really misunderstood in our society. A lot of people say, oh, मेरा बच्चा hyper हो जाता है. And I always, whenever I'm taking a clinical interview, I ask them, what do you mean by hyper? Because in clinical terms, what we mean by hyper is a child that's just running around all the time, putting themselves in dangerous situations, climbing drawers, climbing cupboards, jumping off from them, has no sense of safety or security, or has no sense of how to keep themselves safe. A lot of the times, parents describe their children as hyper. What they're really meaning is that my child becomes really, really stubborn or starts having temper tantrums. So just a little bit of being mindful there. If you are seeking support and you do say that, a lot of some professionals might not clarify or ask for clarification. So just be aware that hyperactivity is not the child being stubborn, but it's actually, being on the go all the time, not being able to stay in their seat. And this is atypical to other children. So not, if they're in grade 1 or KG or whatever, and there's an expectation to sit down, other children are sitting, and that child isn't and is just always running around, then that's a cause for concern. Behavioral difficulties, this is usually why parents come in to seek support. कि मेरा बच्चा इसको मार रहा है या is just not listening and stuff like that. If a child has trouble sleeping or there are changes in sleeping patterns, so that means that they might not be able to fall asleep, or they might be getting up in the middle of the night, or they're having nightmares, then that's a cause for concern. Excessive worries and fears, if they have irrational fears, छोटी छोटी चीज़ों पे टेम्पर टैंट्रम थ्रो करना कि नहीं मुझे डर लग रहा है पानी में नहीं जाना, stuff like that. Okay, just irrational fear that you think shouldn't be there, or just worrying about little things, asking what if questions, what if this happens, or what if that happens, what if an earthquake comes, and they're just things that you wouldn't expect a child to worry about. Trouble eating or changes in eating habits. So if a child is eating so much that they're binging so much that they're puking and driving themselves up to that point, that's a cause for concern. But also losing any sort of appetite can be concerning as well. This one's really important: persistent complaining of unexplained physical symptoms. So a child who's having a lot of stomach aches, headaches, all those kind of physical symptoms, but you've gone to all sorts of doctors and they've said that there's no physical or medical underlying condition. Then what happens is that a child might be having some sort of a mental health difficulty and they're just not able to express it. So they might be having anxiety, and a lot of children say, oh, I have a lot of butterflies in my stomach, and when you ask them to clarify what kind of stomach ache it is, so they might not know that that's related to anxiety. They might just say, oh, I'm having a really bad stomach ache. So it's really important to kind of notice when do those stomach aches or headaches start. So for example, if a child has a learning difficulty, every time they're in English, for example, they might tell their teacher, oh, I'm having a really bad stomach ache, I need to go to the bathroom, because they want to avoid that situation because it might be really, really hard for them. And visible low mood and sadness for long periods of time. Depression is a real thing in children. Children as young as 3 can have depression. It looks a little bit different than adult depression, but it is a very real thing. So if a child is low in mood for two weeks or more, then it is important that you seek support. Okay, so I want to emphasize that there's a difference between mental health difficulties and learning difficulties. They all fall under the broad umbrella term of psychology and mental health, but learning difficulties are difficulties that you are in taking in information and processing it. So one of the most important ones, or one of the most talked about ones, is dyslexia, for example, or ADHD. That doesn't mean it's not related to how smart or not smart the child is, it's just that their needs are different and learn differently. And mental health difficulties are difficulties in social, emotional, behavioral areas. So anger, aggression, mood, all of those things. but there is a relation, there is a link between the two. Learning difficulties can cause mental health difficulties, and mental health difficulties can cause learning issues. So a child who has an undiagnosed dyslexia, for example, may become really, really angry whenever they sit down to work. So that's a mental health difficulty. Or a mental health difficulty can cause learning issues. Like I said, if a child is having those difficulties, they might not be able to pay attention in class, so they might not be able to learn so well. Okay, emergencies and immediate referrals. Thank you, Anna, for bringing that point up about self-harming. Children can self-harm. It looks a little bit differently in younger children. So, for example, children 3, 4, 5 years old, they might not cut themselves, but they might headbang just to feel some sort of a feeling, or they might get so overwhelmed that they don't know how to deal with that. So the way they know how to do is by banging their heads or putting themselves in dangerous situations. Other examples of self-harm, especially in adolescents, include substance abuse, so putting themselves at risk on purpose, or sexual promiscuity. We might not think that our children are doing that, but they might put themselves in risks of sexual harm as well as a way to self-harm. And if you are observing things like that, it's important that you seek support immediately and talk to a professional, because suicide is real. Children can end up, even if they're just self-harming, they can end up harming themselves up to the point that it becomes fatal, or they might have suicidal tendencies, they might have suicidal thoughts, and they might want to end their lives. So if you observe comments like, oh, why was I ever born? Or I wish I could die, I wish I'd never been born. Those are really, really important observations. They might just write it, they might just make comments of it. It's very important that if they are doing that, that you seek support, because the first thing that you need to do is make sure that they're safe. Okay, just spelled the wrong code. Any questions so far? No? Okay. So how, as an adult working in schools or at home, can you